Now let's review the rules that govern the designated hitter and the available options. Coaches have two options for using the DH. The traditional DH, which includes 10 starting players, including a designated hitter, or the player DH, which includes 9 starting players, one of whom acts as both a defensive player and the designated hitter. We said earlier that it is important to verify which option is being used when inspecting the lineup cards at the plate meeting. But why is that? Because once the lineups have been accepted by the plate umpire, the option is set in stone. It cannot be changed. A team that elects to begin the game with a straight 9 lineup cannot switch to one of the DH options later. And a team that begins the game using the traditional DH cannot later change to the player DH option. The only change that can be made is that a team using one of the 2 DH options can remove the designated hitter from the game, and the lineup reverts to a straight 9. Let's cover the traditional designated hitter option. In this lineup, the DH is a 10th starter who hits for any of the 9 starting defensive players. If a pinch hitter or pinch runner is used for the designated hitter, that player then becomes the new DH. However, use of the DH is terminated when one of 2 things happens. A defensive player or any previous defensive player for whom the DH has batted enters the game as a batter, pinch hitter, or pinch runner in place of the DH, or the designated hitter or any previous DH assumes a defensive position. Also, in the traditional DH option, the designated hitter and the player for whom the DH bats are locked into the same spot in the batting order. No creative attempts to move players around in the lineup can change that. That means that the DH and the defensive player for whom the DH batted can never be in the game at the same time, either in different defensive positions or in different spots in the batting order. That also goes for any player who has entered the game as a defensive player for whom the DH has batted. That player may not move to another spot in the batting order. Let's look at a lineup card with a traditional DH and make some changes. First, we're going to assume that number 36, Torres, has replaced number 10, Garcia. We confirmed Torres was listed as an available substitute and crossed out his name to show that he has entered the game. Since he entered for number 10, Garcia, we entered his name and uniform number as a substitute in the 7th spot in the order. We circled his number to show that he is no longer eligible to re-enter if he leaves the game. Next, Coach Hogg replaces number 25, Parker, with number 32, Ross. As always, we check to be sure that Ross is an eligible sub. His name is not crossed out, however it has a red dot next to it, indicating that Ross has been used as a courtesy runner. We ask whether he is an eligible substitute. Yes, but we should also recognize that, by entering the game as a substitute, Ross is no longer eligible to serve as a courtesy runner. After crossing Ross's name off the list of eligible subs, we should also go to the game card and strike through his number as the runner for the catcher. Then we enter Ross's name and uniform number as a substitute for number 25, Parker. We circle Ross's uniform number to indicate he cannot re-enter after leaving the game. We must also remember that this is just an offensive substitution. Ross has taken Parker's place as the DH, but that does not affect the defensive position of number 24, Cruz. Suppose that, after replacing Parker as the designated hitter, Ross gets a base hit. Coach Hogg immediately opts to replace him with number 24, Cruz, as a pinch runner. Cruz was in the lineup as a defensive player only, but when he enters the game on offense, the designated hitter is terminated. To show this, we cross out Ross's name and uniform number. We also strike through the letters DH next to Parker's name. We circle Cruz's name to indicate that he is now the player of record in the number 4 spot. But we leave Parker's name in the lineup because he is still an eligible substitute. Remember, too, that since Cruz was an original starter, he can leave the game and return. Coach Hogg must be clairvoyant because during the next inning, he has number 25, Parker, bat for number 24, Cruz. We know that Parker is eligible to re-enter because his uniform number has not been circled. We circle both his uniform number and his name to show that he is now the player of record in the number 4 spot. We cross out Cruz's name, but leave his uniform number. When the Beagles return to the field on defense, Coach Hogg elects to bring number 24, Cruz, back to the field as the catcher. Can he do that? Yes. Cruz was a starting player who never left the game until he was replaced by Parker. So we circle Cruz's uniform number on the lineup card and enter his name back in the batting order in the number 4 spot. Then we cross out Parker's name and uniform number, as he is no longer eligible to re-enter the game. At the same time, Coach Hogg reports 2 additional substitutions, number 10, Garcia, for number 8, Hall, and number 20, Young, for number 36, Torres. As a starter, Garcia cannot return to the game in place of Hall because Garcia started the game in the 7th spot in the order. He must replace Torres, who replaced him earlier. Number 20, Young, can enter the game, but if Coach Hogg wants to replace Hall in the lineup, he must insert Young into the number 2 spot in the order. First, we cross out Torres as a substitute and circle Garcia's uniform number to indicate that he may no longer re-enter if he is replaced again. Then we check to be sure that number 20, Young, is an eligible substitute. He is. So we cross out his name on the subs list and enter his name and uniform number as a substitute in the number 2 hole. Let's turn our attention to the player DH. A big difference between the NFHS and the NCAA or MLB versions of this rule is that, in high school baseball, the DH can be used for any of the starting players, not just the pitcher. When a team opts for the player DH option, the designated hitter must be one of the starting defensive players. This player actually has 2 positions. The first is the defensive position assigned to begin the game. The second is the designated hitter. The role of the defensive player may be substituted for by any legal substitute, while the starting designated hitter maintains that spot in the batting order. The original player DH may re-enter the game defensively 1 time. The role of the DH is terminated when a substitute or former substitute for the defensive role participates on offense or when the starting defensive player DH is replaced, either as a hitter or a runner. Obviously, teams use the player DH option because their starting pitcher is also one of their best offensive players. The player DH option allows a team to keep that player in the game on offense even after he is replaced on the mound. Now let's try managing a lineup with a player DH. Suppose that number 15, Brown, loses his steam and must be replaced on the mound. Number 39, Diaz, takes his place on the bump, but Coach Hogg wants to keep Brown's bat in the lineup. Defensively, he may replace Brown with number 41, Yang, playing first base. To show that on the lineup card, we cross out first base next to Diaz's name and replace it with the designation for pitcher. Then we strike through the pitcher designation next to Brown's name and enter Yang's name and uniform number in the substitution area, along with his position designation. We circle Yang's uniform number, and we take care to cross him off the list of eligible substitutes. Unfortunately, Yang makes 2 errors, and Coach Hogg opts to replace him with number 33, King. This is a straight change that still does not change anything to do with Brown's status as the DH. To show the change on the lineup card, we cross off King from the list of eligible subs. Then we cross out Yang's name and uniform number and enter King's name and uniform number, taking care to circle the number and enter his defensive position. Next, Coach Hogg asks to re-enter number 15, Brown, on defense as the center fielder in place of number 10, Garcia. Because Brown started the game as the player DH, he is locked into the number 5 spot in the batting order. Consequently, he cannot replace number 10, Garcia, in the 7th spot. However, Brown can re-enter defensively by replacing King. When he does so, the DH is gone for the rest of the game. Coach Hogg makes that change and moves Brown to center field. He then inserts number 47, Black, into the 7 hole, replacing Garcia and playing first base. On our lineup card, we start by crossing off King. We also strike through his role as DH and change his position to center field. Next, we check to be sure that Black is an eligible substitute. We cross his name off the list. Then we insert his name and uniform number as the substitute for Garcia, taking care to circle Black's uniform number. Let's conclude by discussing charged conferences, which are governed by Rule 3, Section 4. The defensive team is limited to 3 charged conferences in a 7-inning game. Stopping the game to attend to an obviously injured player does not count as a charged conference. Also, a conference is not charged to the defensive team if the pitcher is replaced. In an extra inning game, each team is granted an additional charged conference each inning. After 3 charged conferences in a 7-inning game, or for any charged conference in excess of 1 in each extra inning, the pitcher must be replaced and may not return to pitch. A defensive charged conference concludes when the coach crosses the foul line if the conference is in fair territory. If the conference is in foul territory, the conference concludes when the coach turns to go back to the dugout or bench area. The offensive team is granted 1 charged conference per inning. The umpire will deny any further request for an offensive team conference. An offensive charged conference concludes when the coach turns to go back to the coach's box, dugout, or bench area. A coach who has been restricted to the dugout or bench area may be involved in a charged conference, but the conference must take place in the dugout or bench area. Any such conference concludes when the players turn to go back to their positions on the field. Teams should be given a reasonable amount of time for charged conferences. The plate umpire determines what is reasonable. When one team engages in a charged conference, the other team may also have a conference. The other team's conference is not charged if it concludes when the opposing team's charged conference ends. Charged conferences should be recorded on the game card. In addition to the type of conference, defensive or offensive, the plate umpire should record the inning of the conference, the number of outs at the time of the conference, and the uniform number of the proper batter. It is important to record these details in case a coach disputes the number of charged conferences he or she has used. That concludes this module. Thank you for your attention. If you have questions about this presentation or any other rule governing high school baseball in Utah, please email us at uhsbua.rules@gmail.com. For the Utah High School Baseball Umpires Association, I'm Paul Husselby.